There are a lot of cards in the TCG that either would not work if they were implemented into Duel Links because of its restrictive field card zone and half the starting life points, or would just be completely broken in that version of the game. And in this list, I'll try to go over 10 cards that are somewhat generic and not really reliant on an archetype, which would probably break Duel Links if added to that game. And at number 10, we have NECRO Gardna. This card has the effect where, during your opponent's turn, you can banish this card from your graveyard in order to negate one attack from an opponent's monster. This effect is okay in the TCG, but it hasn't really seen play since the early Lightsworn decks. In Duel Links, players in the game have access to a card called Bacon Saver, who has a very similar effect to NECRO Gardna, except for one little difference. Bacon Saver has a once per duel restriction to its effect, which NECRO Gardna does not have. NECRO Gardna is literally just a better version of Bacon Saver, and Bacon Saver sees tons of play in Duel Links. Because in Duel Links, with its restrictive 3-card zones, having one negate of an attack is much more valuable than one negate in regular Yu-Gi-Oh!, where you can have up to 7 monsters on your side of the field at a time. And having one negate from the graveyard is so good in that game that Bacon Saver is played in basically any deck which has any kind of mill, or one that can send monsters directly from the deck to the graveyard. And since NECRO Gardna is a much more powerful version of Bacon Saver, as it's not once per duel, it would probably see play over Bacon Saver, but honestly, it's kind of a light addition to this list. It wouldn't be the most broken thing in the world, which is why it's only at number 10. And at number 9, we have Honest. Honest has the effect that when a light monster you control battles an opponent's monster, you can use this card from your hand so that your monster will gain attack equal to your opponent's monster's attack. And this hand trap effect was so good that Honest was on the limited and semi-limited list for years in normal Yu-Gi-Oh! So in Duel Links, where hand traps are limited and one of the best hand traps is Sphere Karibo, Honest would just be really good, because the Duel Links meta is pretty reliant on back row, so the few hand traps that exist, i.e. just Sphere Karibo, see a lot of play in meta decks, and there's also lots of decks with light type monsters in them, so Honest would just be an auto-include basically a lot of decks, especially since it can swing the game in your favor very easily and allow you to beat over any monster your opponent controls with any light attribute monster you control. And it's much more difficult to respond to a hand trap with the normal tools in an average Duel Links deck than it is to respond to a set spell or trap card. And with the limited life points, the extra damage Honest allows you to do, in addition to beating over any monster, would just be a little bit too much for Duel Links, which is why they didn't even give Blackwing players Colute the Moon Shadow, a hand trap that only works with the Blackwings, which has an effect similar to Honest, except it only gives a 1400 attack boost instead of a full your opponent's monster attack boost. So if an archetype specific, less powerful version of Honest is considered too strong to be put in Duel Links, then Honest would be straight broken if put in the game. And at number 8, we have Battle Fader. Again, another hand trap. This time, one which stops a whole battle phase. Now in Duel Links, I'm assuming most people who are watching this video probably don't play Duel Links, so a little bit of an explanation. There are very few cards in that game which can stop a whole battle phase, as Duel Links doesn't even have negate attack, let alone Threatening Roar or Wabaku. And like I mentioned earlier, their best ways for stopping attacks outside of spell and traps is by using cards like Bacon Saver from the graveyard or Sphere Karibo from the hand. Now, Battle Fader has an effect where if your opponent declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand in order to end the battle phase. So in Duel Links, where cards like Windstorm of Atakwa are considered so powerful that players are only able to get one copy total in the game, and all this card does is change the battle position of all your opponent's monsters, something like Battle Fader would be absolutely broken in comparison. Because Battle Fader has 3 advantages over Windstorm. For one, it stops the entire battle phase instead of changing the battle position of your opponent's monsters. So no worry about your opponent's defense position monsters getting changed to attack position in order to do their attacks, which is a pretty common tactic for high level games. And 2, it special summons a monster which can be used for all kinds of things, but not as many as you could use it in the TCG. So basically, it would most likely just be used for a tribute of an enemy controller play, a tribute summon, or a synchro summon. And thirdly, it's a hand trap, so you don't have to set it on the field in order to use it during your opponent's turn. Just as long as your opponent's declaring a direct attack and this card is in your hand, you get to use it, which is the biggest advantage over cards like Windstorm or Drowning Mirror Force, cards which are vulnerable on the field to spell and trap card destruction. And at number 7, we have Effect Veiler, another hand trap. Now, effect negation in Duel Links is almost non-existent, and the few cards which can negate monster effects are a handful of trap cards, none of which being Breakthrough Skill, Fiendish Chain, Fog Blade, Solemn Strike, or Impermanence. Basically, Duel Links doesn't have any of the good trap cards which negate effects. Their best one in Duel Links either require a discard cost, or are memory loss, which isn't half bad, I guess. Effect Veiler is better though, because it allows you to disrupt plays during your opponent's first turn, and it doesn't require you to set it on the field in order to be vulnerable to spell and trap card destruction. Which is why Effect Veiler and Impermanence see play in the TCG, because negating one key monster effect for the turn can sometimes shut down your opponent's entire combo. And there are combo decks in Duel Links as well. It's just there's no Effect Veiler or Impermanence in order to stop them. So if they did add Effect Veiler, that would completely change the game. And I guess break it, I don't know. I don't think this one really breaks the game as much as some of the other ones do. It would just be a really good staple card that everyone would use, but wouldn't be as game-breaking as some of the more higher spots on this list. And at number 6, we have the YuGiOh, the Keeper of the Sacred Tree. This is a level 10 synchro monster with generic materials, 3100 attack, which is actually a significant enough number to mention to be a plus, as the attack value is enough to beat over basically all main deck monsters that don't have attack increase in effects applied to them. And its effect is, it cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects, except during your main phase 2. Now, here's the thing about Duel Links, they don't have a main phase 2. So this card would just be permanently untargetable, and being a 3100 attack beat stick that's untargetable is kind of a big deal in Duel Links. And you'd think this would be one of the most broken cards in the list if it wasn't for a few things about Duel Links that you should also know about. One of the most popular skills people take in Duel Links is called Beatdown, which gives all of your level 5 or higher monsters 300 extra attack for each level 5 or higher monster you control. So, if you have 3 level 5 or higher monsters on your side of the field, for example, each of those monsters will gain 900 attack each. So, what I'm trying to say is that the average meta deck can easily get over 3100 attack, and just destroy this monster by battle. So, it wouldn't be unbeatable. And point number 2, Drowning Mirror Force and Wall of Disruption are staple cards, as both of these trap cards see lots of play, and neither of them target. So the average deck in Duel Links already has answers for YuGiOh. So it wouldn't be an unkillable monster like I'm hyping him up to be, but it would still be a very difficult card to get rid of nonetheless, to the point where I don't think they'd actually add him to the game, especially since his effect specifically references the main phase 2, which doesn't exist. And at number 5, we have Dinowrestler Pankratops. This is a 2600 attack beat stick, which can special summon itself from your hand if your opponent controls more monsters than you do. And it has a quick effect where you can tribute itself to destroy one card on your opponent's side of the field. Now, the fact that this is a high attack monster with an easy special summon requirement and an emergency destroy any one card your opponent controls makes it so good that it's a staple card in the regular version of YuGiOh. But the power level of this card is too high for something like Duel Links, where spell speed 2 effects on monsters are rare, as is easily special summoning a 2600 attack beat stick. If this card is good enough to see play in TCG decks outside of its archetype, then that means it would be incredibly good in Duel Links, to the point where it would be kind of overpowered if it was put in the game, as being able to destroy anything during your opponent's turn, while also having a big body in the field to pressure your opponent to try to get rid of it, is just too much for most Duel Links decks to handle. And at number 4, we have Red Reboot. This is a counter trap card, which can negate the effect of an opponent's trap card, and then lock them out of activating any other trap cards for the rest of the turn, at the cost of allowing your opponent to set another trap card directly from their deck, as well as the original trap card you negated not being destroyed and just being set back face down. And the reason this card sees so much play in the TCG is because it has an additional effect where you can pay half your life points in order to activate this card from your hand, which basically turns this into a better trap stun, and one you can use during your first turn. And this one card can completely shut down most decks that rely on trap cards. Now, in Duel Links, you may remember that I said Drowning Mirror Force and Wall of Disruption are staple cards, and that's true, but also add Paleozoic Canadia and Treacherous Trap Hole. There's a few other traps that players like to use also, but these 4 cards are the most common and deadly, and you're almost guaranteed to see them in half the decks you play against at higher rankings. And because so many decks are reliant on trap cards, cards like Hey Trunade, a card which just returns all of your opponent's set spell and traps to their hand, are considered so good that it's currently semi-limited in the game, which is actually a much bigger deal in Duel Links, as you're only allowed to have 2 semi-limited cards in your deck total, instead of just 2 copies of each individual semi-limited card. And Red Reboot is better, arguably, because you can just attack into your opponent and then choose to use Red Reboot whenever you want in order to shut down your opponent's trap cards for the turn. And if you have enough to OTK during that turn, there's not much they can do to stop you if you're using Red Reboot. Basically, since Duel Links is so trap card reliant, Red Reboot is just infinitely more valuable in that game than it is in the TCG. And it's already really good in the TCG as well, so its power level would be much higher in Duel Links. And at number 3, we have SEKKA'S Light. Now, this is a card that can only be activated if you have no spell or traps in your graveyard, and it locks you out of using any other spell or trap cards for the rest of the duel, except other copies of SEKKA'S Light. And what it does is allow you to draw 2 cards. It also has a graveyard effect where you can banish this card from your graveyard in order to send 1 monster from your hand back into your deck, and then draw 1 card. So, it has a Pot of Greed effect, and it allows you to mulligan from the graveyard, all at the cost of not being able to use any other spell or trap cards basically in your deck, as it negates all of their effects for the rest of the duel. And these 2 effects are so good that this card kinda single-handedly allows Monster Mash decks to be viable, decks in which you run nothing but monster cards, and 3 copies of SEKKA'S Light as your only spell and trap cards for the deck. And in Duel Links, where you're allowed to have a 20-card deck instead of a 40-card deck, SEKKA'S Light would be even more valuable, as there's already decks that only play Treacherous Trap Hole as like their only spell or trap card in the deck. The amount of draw power that SEKKA'S Light grants you, for the only downside of having to play a Monster Mash deck, is just so good that it would be completely broken in a format with 20-card decks. Because I'll let you know, going +1 off of drawing 2 cards is one of the best effects in the game, and its graveyard effect is literally a skill that Bandit Keith in the game can use called Switcheroo, which is a skill that's so good that it's one of the most used skills in the game. And because of how good SEKKA'S Light would be in the game, I can't see them ever adding it. And at number 2, we have Scapegoat. This is a really good quick play spell card in the TCG that allows you to special summon 4 sheep tokens to your side of the field who can't be used for tribute summons. Duel Links only has 3 monster card zones, so playing this card isn't possible, as you have to special summon 4 tokens, and you can't choose to special summon less than 4 monsters. So it literally would break the game if you activate it in the way that you can't actually use it. And Scapegoat is just one of the few cards in the TCG that literally won't work in Duel Links. And that's why it's on this list, as it kind of fits the theme of it a little bit, even if it's not really on the list for being super powerful in the Duel Links meta, like most of the other cards on this list were here for. And at number 1, we have Chain Strike. Chain Strike is a quick play spell card that's currently limited to 1 copy in the TCG, where it does 400 points of damage times the chain link this card is involved in. So, if you activate this card as a chain link 4, it will do 400 times 4 damage for a grand total of 1600 points of damage. Now obviously you'd be trying to use this card in a higher chain link than that, but to Duel Links' credit, they do have a limited spell and trap card zone, so with only 3 zones available, you wouldn't be able to get to very high numbers of chain links for Chain Strike to go off on big numbers anyway. But I should also let you know that cards like Restrictive Revolution, a spell card which inflicts 200 points of damage to your opponent for each card in their hand, is considered such a good burn card that it's limited to 1, and in fact was the first ever card in Duel Links to be limited. And at a chain link 4, Chain Strike does 2 times more damage than 1 Restrictive Revolution used against an opponent with their 4 card opening hand. And if you're able to get a chain link 5, Chain Strike will inflict 2,000 points of damage, which is half the starting life points in Duel Links. Now, doing half of your opponent's starting life points as damage with 1 card is just too powerful for Duel Links, especially since Chain Strike is already considered too powerful for the regular game, where the card has been basically limited since it was first introduced, and they have no intentions of taking it off the limited list because it still sees some success even when played at 1 copy. So if they gave Duel Links 1 copy of Chain Strike, it would basically guarantee FTK burn decks becoming viable, and pretty easily, as at least Duel Links burn decks in the past required luck with getting a heads on a cup of ace in order to get their combo starting, giving you the advantage needed in order to draw enough burn cards. But even 1 copy of Chain Strike would basically guarantee very easy FTK burn deck strategies, and FTKs are usually the strongest kinds of decks you can possibly make, which is why I think Chain Strike would be the most broken card to add to Duel Links, and it's probably why they will never add it. Alright, and that's the end of the list. I actually think there's a ton more cards in the TCG that would break Duel Links if they were added to the game. But if you know of any other really good ones that should have made this list, I'd love to hear about them, as well as future ideas for videos just like this one down in the comments. And also, don't forget to subscribe for weekly videos just like this one.